Hi everyone, Sabrina here from Scrappy Tails Crafts, and today I'm going to be showing you my first video design team project for Miss Ink stamps. I'm very excited to be joining the first ever Miss Ink video team. So Miss Ink just went ahead and created a YouTube channel, so if you want to subscribe, that would be great. And there's also a giveaway as a part of this video, but I'm going to talk about what I'm doing first. The products that I decided to use for today's video is a stamp set called Boo Crew, and then I'll be using two of Miss Ink stencils, and they're probably the coolest stencils now in my stash. They're really intricate and just really cool looking, so I thought they would be perfect for two Halloween cards. I went ahead and started by stamping out all the images from the Boo Crew stamp set with Memento Tuxedo black ink on 110-pound white Neenah cardstock. Both the paper and the ink are alcohol friendly, so I will be coloring these in with my Copic markers. And whenever I color with my Copics, I typically use 3 colors. Unless the image is really small, then I'll only use 2. And I always start from darkest to lightest. And so for the moon, I added most of the darker color towards the bottom and around the edges, and then I'll go over the darker areas with my mid-tone and just bringing that color more towards the center, but I do leave a little bit of a white space for my highlight color. And by doing that, I am left with a center highlight, and that is primarily how I color. It is the easiest way for me to learn shading. I just know that the darker color always goes on the edges of objects. And then I also add darker color where 2 objects meet. So where those branches meet the trunk of the tree, I'll add a little bit more darker color where those branches connect. And so this video is a part of the Miss Ink video introduction week. And there are some giveaways, so all you have to do is leave a comment on each of the new design team members' videos. There are 4 in total, and I'm the last one to publish. And so if you comment on each one, you are entered into the chance to win a $25 gift card or a $100 grand prize. And by the way, I'm coloring these rocks and also those bats in with a black fine liner. And I also darkened up those fence tips because my Memento was running a little bit dry there. And so the theme of this week is to introduce ourselves. So my name is Sabrina. My card making style is kind of all over the place. I don't really have a distinct style. I like to try new things. I really gravitate towards coloring. And I typically will color with my Copics, but every once in a while I do enjoy coloring with my Zig watercolors. And once in a blue moon I'll color with my color pencils. I tend to do more complex cards because, believe it or not, I struggle the most with simple cards. I just have a problem with a lot of white space. I love it on other people's cards, but when I do it, I just have like the urge to stick something in that white space. So that is something I struggle with. So my style, I guess, is more towards very busy scenes, complex ink blended backgrounds. I love ink blending. And I tend to go with the trends in the card making industry. So right now, stencils are a huge thing, so I'll be using 2 stencils today, and slimlines. I'll be creating a slimline card. And if you're watching this video over on my Scrappy Tails Crafts channel, you know that I love to work with acetate. That is something I love to implement in almost all of my cards. In today's video, I'll be using vellum, so I do like adding specialty papers onto my cards. I just feel like they add an expensive looking touch. So these cute little critters are in ghost costumes, which I think is really adorable. It reminds me of when I used to go trick-or-treating, and it seemed like the older I got, the less I cared about the costume and the more I cared about just like grabbing candy. And so towards the end, like when I started to ease off of trick-or-treating, I think maybe when I was like 13, me and my friends literally just put a sheet over ourselves and cut holes for the eyes. And we had pillowcases as little treat bags. So that's what this reminded me of, and I love that little bunny. So cute. And since most of these critters are completely white, I am using C2 and C0 for shading. I'm adding very little color, just barely touching the tip of my marker to the edges of my animals here, just to give them a little bit of dimension. But I remember when I first started coloring in white, I was so heavy-handed with the grays, so just remember to leave quite a large center white space. For that little spider, he is technically also wearing a ghost costume, but later on I'm going to color him in completely black just because he wasn't really standing out, and you'll see that later. So my coloring is all done. We're going to go ahead and start card number 1. And I'm going to cut out a stitched hillside, and that rectangle you see is cut from watercolor paper. I really like watercolor paper with ink blending, so if you are having trouble ink blending, I would recommend trying watercolor paper. This is Canson XL. I'm using an ink blending brush here to apply the ink. I started with mustard seed. Now I'm going over that color with pine needles. And then for my last color, I will use chipped sapphire. And I am changing my brush for each ink. I do have one brush for each color family, so I'll use the same yellow brush for all of my yellow inks, and green and blue. So I'll go over each color one more time. Oxides are really great for blending, so you don't have to use too much elbow grease. Alright, and now I'm going to grab this swirl stencil. It is really cool. It was a part of the Alice release, but when I received this stencil, I knew I wanted to create a Halloween card. So I'm going to ink blend on it, and in order to keep the rectangle panel from not moving, I just taped the back of the stencil to the top of my card panel. And I'm going to go over the stencil with the same exact inks, except I'm going to pull the lighter color more toward or more higher up on the ink blending. So you can see this yellow is on top of the green. And because oxides are pigmented, they will kind of take over the color that's underneath them. Not completely, they're still a little bit transparent, but because they're a hybrid, there is a little bit of opacity there to cover what's underneath it. So now I'm going in with the pine needles, and I'm covering up most of that chipped sapphire, but I will, just for the edges, add that chipped sapphire back in. And because I'm adding to the layer that's already underneath, it's going to naturally be a little bit darker, but it will be very subtle. So you're going to see when I peel this panel off, it is a subtle swirl, and when I saw it, I'm like, do I like this? I don't know. So I will play around with it to get it to the point where I'm happy. I'm going to spray my glass mat down as well as my stencil to clean it up, and I don't know why I left this in. I kind of think it's satisfying to watch things get clean. And make sure when you're cleaning stencils to clean the front where the ink was and the back, because once you're adding water to it, the ink will run onto your glass mat and underneath that stencil. So here's that hill again, which I cut from green cardstock, and just at the bottom I will add the pine needles to add a little bit of dimension. And then I'll take that stencil again, and I'm lining it back up onto the panel to make sure it's going to line up with this grass. And again, I'm going to tape the back of this hill, or the front of this hill, to the back of the stencil. And I forgot to mention, but I was using finger daubers, and I'm doing it again here because this stencil is so intricate. If you were to use a ink blending tool or a brush, you could move those little tiny pieces, unless you add pixie spray. That's an option, but I really like the finger daubers because they're foam and they're going to apply more ink than the brush anyway, and because I wanted the second layer to be darker, I personally liked using the finger daubers. And again, I use one finger dauber per color family. And so I'm going to take my die cuts now and arrange this little scene. And once I added that hillside to the background, I was much happier. I did feel like it looked more like a swirl, but because I wanted it to be a night sky, I'm going to add some stars using a Gonzai Kiritaki silver watercolor. And I'm just using an old paintbrush to flick on these little stars. And I think this added a nice little shine, and I'll even mess with that background a little bit more later on. But I'm going to first pop up my hillside. And I'm using some U-line tape here for that. And then behind that hill, I'm going to glue the moon flat. But if I were to do this again, I would also pop it up. And then for my 3 ghost critters, I popped those up. And then for the pumpkins and the snail and the candy, I glued those flat with my art glitter glue. And then I'm going to work on my sentiment. So I think I chose Haunted Hellos, Happy Halloween. Let's see. Nope. Trick or treat, Happy Halloween. I got half of it right. So I stamped that on black cardstock, and I'm now white heat embossing the sentiment. And I'm going to cut that out with a stitch banner. And then I'll add foam tape behind it, and then I'm going to pop it up over to the left top corner. And something I really love to do with my cards is add black and white embossed sentiments. I really love that look. It is another trend, but that has been a trend for a long time. I just really like the boldness of it. So I'm going to mat this panel onto some black cardstock, and this is cut to cover my A2 card base, so I'll just go ahead and attach it onto my 110-pound white Nina card base. And then, like I said, I had to mess with that background more, so I'm pulling in these Miss Ink stars, and these are really cool. In certain light, they look blue, and then if you tilt it in the other direction, it is purple. So very fun little embellishments here. And like I said, something I struggle with is not knowing when to stop, but I do think that these added a cool little touch to the card. And then that is going to complete my first card. And here is a close-up of that one. And now we're going to start on the second card. And like I said, I will be creating a slimline. So I cut a stitch slimline rectangle from a Trinity Stamps die, and then I'm going to do some more stenciling. And this one is a fun, I don't know what you would call this. They're like square diamonds, and they're cascading from larger to smaller. And they're in a swirl. I think I just described it pretty well there. This was also a part of the Alice release, and I must say those stencils from that release are awesome. And it took me a while to get on the stencil train, but now that I'm on it, like, I am making all of my backgrounds with stencils, and they're just a lot of fun. So I wanted to create a black and white card, and then my critters were going to be my pop of color. So I am going to do this entire stencil with Black Soot Distress Oxide ink, and I am again using an ink dauber. This would have been fine to use a brush, but because I wanted this to be very dark, I figured I would just keep using the finger dauber. And because this is not a slimline stencil, I did have to shift it down, but I was able to line it up pretty nicely. I'm going to first clean off my stencil just because I don't want any ink where I don't want it. So I'm going to realign it, flip the panel over, tape it down, and then the same deal. I'm going to ink blend some more color. And I think this ended up looking very cool. It's kind of like psychedelic. So I think a holographic rainbow embossing powder would be so cool. And when I was finished with this, I thought it kind of looked like a NASCAR flag or a little diner. So I can imagine a lot of cards with this stencil. So I'm just finishing up that last little corner there, and then I will remove the tape and clean off my stencil. And so you can see that there is a line where I shifted the stencil, so I will cover that up with a stitch banner a little bit later on. And I'm going to arrange my little critters. And I'm going to have 3 areas for them to kind of sit on. And I really like how the pumpkins added a nice pop of color, and you can see I added vellum on top of the background that I just ink blended. As much as I liked it, it was really busy, and it's still busy with the vellum, but it did tone it down just a little bit. And so for my little spiders, I thought it would be cute if they were hanging on a string of web. So I just cut some black strips and I will layer them behind the spiders, and then they kind of look like they're hanging from the banners. And I cut the banners from purple and orange cardstock again to add a pop of color, but I love that the majority of the card is black and white. So I'm going to stamp out my first sentiment from Boo Crew. This one says, "Have a beautiful day." And then the other one, I will stamp out "Happy Halloween" onto the orange banner. I'm using VersaFine Onyx black ink. And then I'll go ahead and arrange them back onto my card. I'm going to pop up both the banners with foam tape. And I'm making sure to align it on top of the vellum because I haven't glued it down yet. And I want to make sure that the vellum will align with the background panel because it is slightly smaller than that stitch rectangle. One thing I'll add about my card making, I guess, video style is that I typically will do more than just one card because I do sell my cards online and I like to sell them in sets. And so that's a fun fact about me. I own a handmade greeting card business, and that is actually my full-time job. So I make a lot of cards. And if you want to see my other cards, you can head over to my Instagram. I will have it linked down in the description. And also, if you want to subscribe over to my Scrappy Tails channel, that would also be really great. I post all kinds of videos there. So I glued down my little spiders, and you can see I did make them black. I think I used a T6 Copic marker for them. And I added some foam tape behind my critters, pumpkins, and the little snail. So the only thing I'm gluing flat here were the spiders as well as the candies. My favorite glue for card making is art glitter glue. So whenever I'm gluing down small die cuts, I tend to go for the glue, but when I'm gluing panels, I like to use my ATG gun. And while I'm attaching these die cuts, I want to mention over at my Scrappy Tails channel, I plan on having a Halloween card series, which I'm going to start next week. I want to do 13 videos, and all of the cards are going to be related to a Halloween movie. And so there will be some horror movies, and then there will be some like really cute, friendly movies. And I think that's going to be fun because it's going to show 2 different styles of card making. I tend, at least this year, to create more of the spooky Halloween cards. But this one is obviously very cutesy, and I wanted to showcase both styles. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, again, head over to my channel and hit that subscribe button. Alright, so I am finishing up the gluing here, and I'm going to now attach the vellum. Because it's see-through, I did not want to glue anything down yet until these die cuts were glued first. And that way I can hide the glue on top of the checkered black and white panel. So I'll trim off those banners, and then I'm going to embellish this panel. I wanted to add a little bit more orange, and I'm going to make this panel even more busy than it already is, if you can believe it. I don't know what it is. I think the chaos is why I like it. It might not be for everyone, but I think it's kind of cool. So I am using some Trinity stamp embellishments here. There are some little orange pumpkins that I'm adding, as well as some teeny tiny bats. And then those little black dots are called ladybug spots. And I'm also attaching those same purple stars that I used on my last card, and those are Miss Ink embellishments. And so that panel is completed, if you can believe it. I'm not adding anything else. I'm going to mat this onto an orange scallop rectangle by Trinity Stamps. And then I thought about doing the white, but I just didn't like it. So I will instead mat this on black cardstock, which will cover my entire card base. By the way, my Slimline card bases are 8 3/4 by 3 3/4. So I attached it to the black mat, and then I will attach the mat onto my card base, and then that is going to complete my second card. So thank you guys so much for watching. All of the giveaway information is listed down below in the description, and I'm so excited to be a part of this team and to promote Miss Ink products. I love this company, and I'm so honored that they allowed me to join this team. So thank you guys again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!